Okay, what is up, everybody? Today we are going over a game review of my first over-the-board rated tournament. I just got back from the Austin Chess Club and I played this guy over the board, John Thurston. He was a strong 1800 rated USCF player, and I played black. I played with the black pieces, and I managed to make a draw with the black pieces. Although I thought my position was maybe a little better after the first few moves, but my opponent here manages to make a super strong attack against me out of almost like nowhere, right? So my opponent's like a really old guy, and after every move, he basically thought for a long time, and he also moved very slowly, just like physically slowly. So I mean, I really wasn't sure what to expect from this guy, but actually, this game turned out super sharp, and I wasn't expecting it to go down the way it did. So I played this Caracan opening, which I've played over the board. Well, actually, I haven't played over the board, but I play it online quite a lot, and it's supposedly a super solid opening for black. And I've played it a bunch of times on stream, but we go into this line, this Tartakower variation with this pawn on f6 and pawn on f7, right? And generally, I like this position. Black has doubled pawns here, but eventually what you want to do in this situation is maybe make a pawn triangle on the light squares, maybe put your bishop on g7, and maybe even storm these pawns down the board for a quick attack, right? Is the general idea uh, behind this opening. And so here my opponent plays bishop c4, which is a good move. He puts this bishop onto an active square, and I put my bishop on e6, mainly to stop his bishop from developing to f4, right? I want to stop him from playing the dark square bishop onto an active square. So I go here, I control the diagonal before he's able to get out. And in this position, my opponent plays knight e4 here, which actually preserves the option of letting him come to f4 maybe, because now the knight's controlling the f4 square. And in this position, I thought about going queen c7 here to deny the castle, because that would, if I go queen c7 in this situation, I would be able to line up with the bishop and attack the h2 pawn here in the corner. I'm also thinking about potentially bishop g4 here, pinning the knight. And this is just to stop him again from going bishop f4 himself, because if I go bishop g4 and he goes bishop f4, then I just take his bishop and he can't recapture on the f4 square, because then that would lose the queen, right? So I was thinking about bishop f4, and I was thinking about bishop f4. I was thinking about queen c7, and I was also thinking about castling. And I decided here that I would play it simple. I'm not going to go crazy here. I'm just going to castle, get my king to safety. Opponent also castles here, and now I play queen c7 here, right? I play this queen c7, and so apparently chess.com thinks that this is an actual opening. The variation I played, the four gax variation. I don't know what the four gax variation is all about, but bishop d6 here, castles, and here I go queen c7, and I line up my queen with my bishop, and I hit the pawn here on h2, and I'm saying to him, okay, I'm gonna make some problems for you, and I'm gonna force you to wait. Actually, I don't play queen c7 here immediately. I actually go bishop g4, and I pin the knight again just to stop his bishop from coming to f4. I stop his bishop from coming to f4, and my opponent here plays f3. And when I saw this move on the board, I thought, okay, trash move, right? Never play f3. You're not really supposed to weaken your king like this, because again, the pawns in front of your king are generally, these are the bodyguards, right? You're supposed to be staying home, protecting your king. So I thought to myself, okay, what the hell is my opponent doing here? I'm just making weaknesses in his position, and maybe in the long term, I might have queen b6 here, threatening this open diagonal, and also queen b6 would stop his dark square bishop from coming out, because now when you come out, you drop the b2 pawn on the board, right? But anyway, so I have to decide where to drop my bishop back. I thought about going I thought about going to h5 here in this position. And I thought about h5 because, maybe I just want to preserve the light square bishop. And I also thought about dropping it back here to contest his light square bishop. And I thought if I dropped it back and after he takes, I take, I have a weak e6 pawn and we traded off the light squared bishop. But I thought in the long term in that position, I would be able to defend the e6 pawn by maybe going rook e8. And, and also he fixes my doubled pawns if he trades into my bishop in that position, right? And so I decided to just drop the bishop back. And now if he trades into me, again, that's okay with me, right? Because, I get rid of his active light squared bishop and I fix my pawn. So I thought this was okay. But actually my opponent here decides to dodge the bishop trade. He decides to go back here, right? He decides to go back. And the computer actually says bishop d3 is an inaccuracy. The computer wants to trade in here, but my opponent drops the bishop back. And I thought, okay, well, that's good for me, right? I basically made him kind of like waste a move here. And here I decided to go queen c7. So I decided to finish my battery here. And I thought this move was pretty strong because I'm making a threat on h2. And now his knight can't come to f4. And it can't come to g3 either, because if it comes to f4, I just take, right? And he takes and I take back on f4. And if he goes to g3 here, defending, or not defending, just like, rotating his knight to the g3 square, then I would take, pawn takes, queen takes in that position. And so I thought, like, okay, I'm doing okay here. I'm controlling the dark square diagonal, right? I'm controlling the diagonal on the dark squares. I'm controlling the light square diagonal. I thought I was pretty happy with my position here. And I thought if he went for example, h3 here, that seems to just create more weaknesses, right? You can see when you move the pawns in front of a king, you're weakening all these dark squares, right? Maybe in the long run, I can maybe swing my knight over to g3, maybe park it there. I mean, obviously not right now, but just in the long term, that's something that would occur to me to happen. But actually, opponent chooses instead to go, what does he go here? He chooses to go f4. And when I saw this move, I thought, okay, again, I thought it was just a trash move also because, okay, you already moved the pawn once from f2 to f3. Now you're going to move the pawn in front of your king again to f4. I mean, you're generally not supposed to be moving the same pawn like multiple times like that, right? Because, well, you're just kind of wasting time. You're moving the same piece multiple times. How are you going to make progress in the position? You're weakening your king further. And so I saw this move and I was like pretty happy with it, like overall, to see that move. And in this position, I decided to go bishop g4 here. I decided to go bishop g4 here. And the reason I go bishop g4 is, again, I want to pin his knight and I want to keep his position tied down, right? I want to stop his pieces from moving. I'm thinking about, okay, knight d7. I'm thinking about doubling rooks on the e file. And I thought my pieces here were just tying him down, stopping his knight from moving. And I thought, again, I was pretty happy in this position. But here my opponent plays this move h3. Opponent plays this move h3. He kicks my bishop out. And I wasn't expecting this move to be good. But actually, it was a lot stronger than I expected, right? Because, again, you're moving the pawn in front of your king. But the problem with this move is my bishop doesn't have many good squares to go on, right? If I go back this way, keeping the pin, well, first of all, I can't keep the pin because if I try to go back here, then my opponent just pushes my bishop in and my bishop goes to jail here. And I'll lose the bishop and I resign the game from there. So obviously I don't go back. I can't go back to this square either. And if I go back to e6, then I figured, okay, I'm wasting time here, right? Why would I go back to the same square that I started on? And maybe he even pushes me out further with this f5 idea, right? Just kicking my bishop all the way back. I wanted to keep my bishop active, so I figured, okay, well, where else am I going to put it? If I put it on d7, again, this just seems like too passive. So anyway, I decided to trade the bishop for the knight. I decided to trade in because, okay, I figured his knight was. I figured, okay, I'm gonna take and I'm just gonna keep developing. I'm gonna take a piece off the board, and my opponent here decides to recapture the queen, right? And after opponent recaptures with the queen, I realize I'm in a little bit of trouble. And this is where I start to think about the position, because prior to this point, I thought I was doing okay. But after the capture with the queen, our opponent actually has some nasty ideas here. He has like potential checkmate threats on h5 and also on e4 here. For example, our opponent could play the queen onto e4 and potentially go for checkmate here on the h7 square. And he could also potentially go queen h5 here and also give a checkmate this way, right? Teaming up his light squared bishop with the queen. And so I think about it for a while, and I come up with a defensive schema. It was at this point that I realized, like, okay, I might need to play a little bit of defense this game. I mean, the position wasn't as good as I thought it was going to be. And so what my plan was here is I'm going to bring my knight into the game, and what I wanted was to create like a light squared blockade with the pawns, eventually swing my knight over to e4, right? So if you can imagine, let's say I get like a move, and like if my opponent wastes some time here, right, then what I'm going to do is I'm going to make this light squared blockade, right? And what I thought was I'm going to bring my rook to e8, right? And I thought that, okay, I'm going to swing my bishop back, right? And let's say opponent wastes some time. I'm going to put my bishop over there, and I'm going to put my knight onto e4 here. This was the kind of position that I wanted. So in this position, my knight would be super strong. It would be defended by my pawn. His light square bishop would be bad. It would be biting directly into my pawn chain, and I would have a decent spot for the dark square bishop. Was what I was thinking. Anyway, so that was my plan. But obviously, we're playing an actual opponent, so opponent's not just going to waste time here doing nothing, right? So I bring my knight in. I'm putting my knight onto a good square, connecting the rooks, and my opponent here plays. What does he play? He plays this queen e4 move, right? And he decides to threaten checkmate. He decides to threaten mate in one. And here, right, I realize that, okay, I have to do something about the checkmate threat. And I can't push, because if I push, he just takes. And I thought, okay, I'm going to go g6 here first. I'm going to blunt the light squares. But I'm definitely a little bit worried about his attack here, because the bishop also potentially comes to h6 here. And so in addition to maybe shoving this pawn down the board, he's also going to have a nasty dark square attack here, cutting off my escape square of my king, right? He's going to force me to make a weak spot here on h6, maybe put a dark square bishop there, right? But in this position, my opponent thought for a while, and he actually goes for this f5 move, which is a super strong move. It's a super strong move, because if he doesn't go f5 here, if he just, for example, plays like an inaccurate move, all he needs to do is waste a single move here. And I think I'm going to be way better, because I'll play f5, and now, like, what in the world is your queen and bishop doing on this diagonal, right? You have nothing, you have no business being here anymore, and now you're forced back. I'm going to get the rook onto e8, and I'm just going to be very happy with life once again. But of course, my opponent doesn't actually let me do that, and he plays this super nasty f5 move. And he's threatening to shred open my entire king side. Maybe the rook has an open file after trading in. And I definitely can't take him here, right? Because if I take him here, that would just be a total disaster. I would have 3 pawns stacked on top of each other, and they would be tripled, they would be isolated. I don't like that position at all. And so instead, what I do is I finish my defensive maneuver. I bring the rook here, and my job was to tuck the bishop back here to deny his dark square bishop. And I thought here that I was surviving the attack here after takes, right? I realized that, okay, I don't think he's breaking through. I don't think he has enough firepower here to finish me off. Anyway, so I bring the rook to e8. I bring the rook to e8, and my opponent decides to put the queen onto g4, right? And now he's threatening perhaps to shroud open the king like this way, right? Maybe he's threatening to take, and after I take, maybe he's even threatening to sacrifice the bishop on that square. So for example, let's say I waste the turn, right? After takes, check, after something like this, right? Our opponent would totally destroy the position of our king. And if I go in here, then he already has a perpetual check. I have nothing left here to protect myself from the checks of the king. And, you know, I just don't want to expose my king to such a big attack. So in this position, I drop my bishop back, and I thought, well, now if you take, right, after takes, and if you try to sack the bishop, what I'm going to do is I'm going to block with my dark square bishop. I'm going to be able to shield my king. I'm going to be able to protect myself a little bit from just like the incoming onslaught that is about to happen. And also, like, very lucky for me to put the queen on c7, because the queen on c7 also helps defend the 7th rank and just keeps everything defended. You'll notice here that I don't have any piece. There are no pieces in my position right now that are undefended. Every single piece has a defender. There are no loose pieces. So luckily, I stay very solid here. And here, I think our opponent decides to trade in. He trades in, right? I trade in. And he plays this. I mean, at this point, I thought my opponent was thinking about sacrificing bishop for 2 pawns. So he could take, and then I would block with the bishop. So I thought he might try something like that, but our opponent doesn't actually manage, or he doesn't like, he doesn't choose. He chooses not to go for the sacrifice because I think he saw the move and I saw the move, and we both realized that, like, in that position, he didn't have enough firepower to finish me off. So he just opts to go for this quiet move, c3 here, strengthening the pawn chain, because you'll notice that during the course of the attack, like, our opponent has perhaps, like, weakened his king also a little bit. He has maybe a weak pawn on d5, right? And maybe he just wants to play c3 here to strengthen the pawn chain. So our opponent makes a connect 3 here. And I finished putting my bishop on g7. Right, I finished putting my bishop on g7. And our opponent here decides to basically hit us, I think, once. I think our opponent decides to not hit us once. I thought he was going to go bishop f4 here. But instead, he opts for this quiet move, bishop d2 here. So the engine actually says bishop f4 is the best move, but he just goes for this bishop d2 move. And I thought after this bishop d2 move, I was honestly pretty relieved, because it tells me, like, okay, I mean, the opponent here, through this like c3 bishop d2 move, he's basically telling me that, okay, he's out of ideas for now, right? And he doesn't think he can checkmate me right off the bat. He's kind of slowing down the initiative on my king and just, you know, playing a few defensive moves here. In this position, I play f5 here. I play this f5 move to just kick his queen out. I unlock my dark square bishop, and, you know, I take a little bit more space away in the center. And maybe in the long term, I thought, okay, knight f6, and maybe I swing my knight around to e4. I thought the knight really wanted to be on e4 and really wanted the pawn protecting the square. In this position, our opponent goes queen h4, right? Queen h4, and now he's, you know, thinking about ideas like, for example, if I ever, if I ever trade my dark square bishop, then he might come around the other way and maybe, like, give me a checkmate on h7. He might, like, for example, have, like, I mean, it's not happening here, but one thing that could happen if I play this, like, really badly, right, is he might, like, come around and, like, give me this check, right? He might, like, give me this check. That was something that I was considering, something that could have potentially happened, but he goes there. So I, in this position, so he goes there, right? And I, in this position, just finish rerouting the I finished, I think, rerouting the knight. I finished rerouting the knight, and do I finish rerouting the knight here? Yeah, I think I finished rerouting the knight in this position. And here my opponent gives me a check, right? He just goes there and drives my king into the corner of the board. Now the bishop's covering all the squares here. And here our opponent plays rook e1. He's controlling the open file. And now what I do is I'm pretty happy about this move is instead of trading rooks with him, right, which I don't want to trade because if I trade rooks, then he gets his rook on the open file, and what am I going to do with the rook in the corner? It can never go to any square that's actually good, right? So I would much rather just keep the rooks here, was what I thought. And I was potentially also a little scared about this bishop coming to f4, hitting the queen, and maybe eventually parking himself on e5 here, right? I would hate for a situation like this to happen, right? Getting his bishop onto like a nice square. I don't want something like that to happen. I was maybe a little afraid of the bishop coming to g5 also, just pressuring the knight, right? Just cutting off all the good square, just getting his bishop deep into my position. I was a little bit afraid about that. But here I actually find this move, rook e4 here. And rook e4 is a nice move because if he trades with me, then I get to jump my knight onto a square, right? I get to jump my knight onto a square. I get to hit the bishop, right? And if he doesn't trade with me, then what I'm going to do is I'm going to double stack rooks on the e file. And then I'll be totally in control of the e file here, was my thought. Anyway, and this rook also hits the queen. I'm thinking to myself, maybe I just want the queen to go back as well. Maybe I want to send the queen back to a bad square. But instead he takes and I take, right? And after he goes bishop f4 here, he hits the queen, right? He hits the queen. And I'm still a little bit scared because in this position there's still problems, right? There's still problems because if I move my queen here to b5, b6 and try to attack the pawn here and maybe put some pressure on this d4 pawn, then I thought maybe he had queen e7 here, breaking into my 7th rank and just doing tons of damage on the dark squares, right? Maybe after he kicks my queen out, like he might, this queen on the dark square combined with the attack of the bishop, I thought could create some really nasty threats, because you will also notice here that my king's completely out of squares. My king has nowhere to go. In a position like if I go here and he puts his bishop to, and he maybe plays like a move like maybe he plays a move like queen e7, continuing in this position, just pressuring everything, right? If I make a move here and I just like waste some time, I go here, right? Then here it's already checkmate. You can see here it's already checkmate in 5 moves, because after the bishop goes to e5 here and takes, that's actually a checkmate. The king totally has no squares. The combination of his light square bishop and his queen covering the dark squares here, my king is totally out of squares. I'm simply checkmated here on h8. So I was a little bit scared about this queen infiltration. So I couldn't move the queen to b6, even though I kind of wanted to. And so instead what I find here is I thought to myself, okay, I would love to give a fork on g5, right? This fork might work. It doesn't work right now because his bishop covers the square and his queen covers the square. And even though the knight covers the g5 square here, if I push here, he just simply takes. After knight takes, queen takes, I'm simply down a pawn. And so here I actually find this queen d8 move. And queen d8 move here basically trades off the queen. It forces a queen trade because, and the engine here is saying queen d7 is best. The engine just wants me to maintain pressure. But here I was also a little bit worried about like potentially the bishop coming to f6 here also, because in that position the bishop maybe would take the pawn and I wouldn't be able to recapture the pawn, because well, my pawn in that position would be, turn the light on, and my pawn in that position would be pinned, right? I would not be able to recapture that way because the queen would be eyeing down the h file. So for example here, right here, something like this, here, and then let's say he captures this way. I don't have a recapture with the pawn, was something I noticed about the position. So anyway, I put my queen, right? I put my queen on D7 here, and basically what this is saying is, hey, I'm forcing the queen trade, dude. Because if you don't trade queens with me, then if you choose to not trade queens with me, then, well, I'm going to force your queen onto a bad square, basically. I'm going to kick your queen out, right? I'm going to kick your queen out. Your queen has nowhere really good to go. You can't go anywhere on the H file, right? You can't stay on the dark square diagonal. If you try to put the bishop here, then I take with the knight. And so this square is covered. And so the only places really for the queen to go is back to E1. And if this queen goes back to E1, then I thought in that position I was pretty happy, because basically I stop his like attack completely. So my opponent decides to trade, I decide to take here, and in this position my opponent actually offers me a draw, and I take the draw here because my opponent's 1800 rated, and I thought, okay, yeah. I mean, this endgame, my opponent always has the bishop pair. I mean, even though I have an active knight, which kind of cancels out the fact that he has two bishops, right? Opponent has the bishop pair. It's an open board. I thought that, okay, it's a 4-on-3 here on the queen side, so maybe he might try to make it past pawn, but also I could maybe push the c pawn forward, and after you imagine a trade happening here, right here, pawn takes, I thought maybe I could leave an isolated pawn, but also he could potentially push through and make it past pawn, and I wouldn't want that to happen. And also, I just wasn't in the mood for potentially like blundering like an endgame here with the two bishops. So I agreed to draw with him. And overall, like, I'm pretty happy with how I played this game. I think it was like pretty high accuracy. Except I let my opponent develop like an attack in the start of the game that I don't think I should have allowed. His attack came in a lot quicker than I was expecting. And this trade, I think I shouldn't have made it. I don't think I should have went in here for the knight. I probably would have just dropped the bishop back, actually, to e6. Or, okay, I can't drop the bishop back to e6. Or what does the engine say here is the best move? Taking is actually best. So actually, it turns out, so the engine thinks here that taking is the best, I guess. So, well, I guess like I don't think I had anything better to go for in that position. I think he just, our opponent got himself in like a nice attacking position, and I just had to spend that game defending. So anyway, that was my first over the board tournament, and also like 1800 USCF rating. If I'm able to like draw and like win as white and draw with black consistently at that level, I don't think I would be too mad about myself. I think I would be happy with that, and I think it would be a strong start to playing some tournament chess. Okay, until next time, I'll keep everyone updated on how chess tournaments are going. And remember to subscribe to this channel if you're watching the YouTube video. If you watched this long, be sure to subscribe. And until next time.